And one of the things I want to talk about is communication and how you deal with things, and ultimately, how do you let someone go? You might not hear that a lot, but how do you let somebody go? And we might also get into a little bit about who do you keep? Who do you keep? You're like, well, wait a minute. We're followers of Jesus. Like, we're supposed to include everybody. We're supposed to let everybody in. Everybody has access to our hearts. Everybody gets in. But is that really what we see? Is that really what we see from Jesus? And I think relationships and people that have the most issues, the most difficult time, and as progressing in ministry, and if you're just joining us at Requit Ministries, we've gone through the scriptures and we've seen that it's not just those people on the stage, it's not just pastors, it's not just priests, not just people called to the ministry, but every single person that is following Jesus Christ as their Lord and Savior is in the ministry. Because we've been put here, we've been left here, we have been equipped and designed to go out to share the good news, impact people for the kingdom, and that's exactly what God has us for, so you're in the ministry. And so because of that, we see, and I see so many times that it's relationships with people's family is one of the most common reasons people have stunted spiritual growth. Yeah, you heard me right. It's often people's families in their interactions with their family, and people that have a drain on them. It rarely is it families pushing them up. And you see that sometimes, and thank the Lord for that, because that's rare. But quite normally, what happens is where people are, they draw them back. You've been putting your faith in Jesus and you're growing and growing spiritually. Quite often, it's your family that sees you as the little kid. It's your family that sees you as somebody that was impactful in that stage of their life, and they're sort of stuck there. And because of that, you might even know this, but because of that, they unintentionally, a lot of times, they keep you in and funnel you back into those relationships. And also you have those relationships that you go deeper into, and you stay in that same lane. But that's not the way that God's designed us. God's designed us that we keep growing. That we keep growing. And before we get into this, I just want to encourage you, subscribe to this channel. I greatly appreciate it. It helps us get a little bit higher in the ranking, makes us more visible. And hit that subscribe button. So we thank you for doing that. And I want to get into this because there's a couple of things that I see in relationships, and especially with our family. I don't want to pick on, I'm not anti-family, but I see this too often. The first thing that I see quite often is people put too high of a priority on appeasing their family. They put too high of a priority. They have a different view on it. And I'm not talking about your spouse, it's different. It's different. Well, we might talk about that later on in following podcasts. But what I see is people put too high a priority on their allegiance to their family. And then you appease the family member. And it changes the way that you act. It just changes the way that you interact. But Jesus didn't do this at all. Do you notice that? That Jesus didn't do this at all. Remember, didn't he say, didn't you know that I must be in my Father's house? He was with his parents. He was with his biological mother, and then Joseph, who raised him as his own. They went to Jerusalem. They were celebrating the Passover, and they were there, and they were celebrating, and things had happened, and the parents left, and they missed Jesus. They came up and found Jesus and said, well, why did you do this to me? How could you treat us this way, Jesus? You scared us to death. You know how parents, that like often we do that. We kind of take it out on the child when we're just scared, we're insecure about something. But Jesus says something powerful and reveals something about the connection that we should have in relationships and in relation to our family, and this in particular, he said, did you know that I should be in my Father's house? Now he's still respected, he's still honored, he's still submitted to his earthly parents, or earthly guardians, but he recognized his Father in heaven was really his Father. But aren't we the same way? Don't we have a Father in heaven? Jesus taught us to pray that way, our Father who is in heaven. Like we're talking to God that way because we actually are. Because we're grafted into his family. And then didn't Jesus also say, when there was this time when he just came off a healing and he got a little secluded and people were pressing in, and then what happened was some people came to him and say, hey, your mother and your brothers are outside and they want to have access to you, they want to get to you. And he said, who is my mother and who are my brothers? And then he goes on to say, anybody who follows me, anybody who puts their faith, like, that's my mother, that's my brother. And then didn't Jesus say, when he was confronted and they said, don't you come to bring peace? But Jesus said, I didn't come to bring peace, but a sword. And then he goes on to talk about how, in fact, because when you put your faith in Jesus, when you follow after Jesus, because of that truth, you're going to divide. Wasn't that the message that Jesus said? But I think what happens is our culture kind of moral culture view on family creeps into our spiritual relationship, our spiritual reality, the truth of how we will be for eternity. And it kind of blurs those lines a little bit. It doesn't mean to neglect your family. It doesn't mean to be against your sisters and brothers and parents or anything like that, or cousins. It doesn't mean that at all, but it means to have a correct priority on those things.